was the defining moment of the Reagan presidency.
He knew darn well what needed to be said and what needed to be done.
Ronald Reagan changed the world for the good.
From his famous speech to his private White House battles, it's the untold story of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Plus, our exclusive interview with Mikhail Gorbachev.
I'm Tony Snow. Join us for Tear Down This Wall, a Fox News Channel special.
Fox News Live, I'm Deri Alexander. Hello, everyone. President Bush meeting with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak at Camp David today. He told Mubarak he was not ready to set a timeline for establishing a Palestinian state. Fox News Sunday's Tony Snow sat down with the Egyptian leader and got his take on Yasser Arafat's leadership.
Look, Arafat now is weakened, very weak. He has no police, no intelligence, no tools to work. That's why he's very weak. If you ask the people now, they said they are fed up. But if he's given the authority and giving the tools, I think he will work very good. If not, the people who brought him, elected him, will not accept him afterwards. We should give him a chance anyway.
Now, you can see Tony's entire interview with President Mubarak on Fox News Sunday tomorrow on the Fox Broadcast Network. Check your local listings for the time and channel. Police say bones found by a dog today in Rock Creek Park were those of an animal. The dog's owner called police when her dog brought home a long, thick bone and a ball and a socket joint. She thought they might be Chandra Levy's. Levy's remains were found in that same park. Investigators will be searching the park tomorrow for clues. They'll be using cadaver dogs, and a zoologist will help them search for animal dens and burrows.
And they're off. And War Emblem.
No Triple Crown winner at this year's Belmont Stakes. War Emblem won the first two legs of the crown, but stumbled at the start and finished poorly today. The winner was Sarava, a horse. This horse becomes the biggest long shot ever to win the Belmont, 70-1 odds. Medaglia d'Oro finished second, and Sunday Break was third. I'll have more news at the bottom of the hour. Now stay tuned for Fox News Sunday special, Tear Down This Wall. Stay tuned.
Behind me stands a wall that encircles the free sectors of this city.
It was an ugly piece of concrete with barbed wire.
You can see no man's land where the killing fields were, where a lot of people tried to make their way to the wall and didn't.
It wasn't just the wall, it was the system.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
It was important for the setting, but mostly it was important for the content. Most of all, it was important because the man who said it obviously meant it.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In the early morning hours of August 13th, 1961, East Germany began to erect a monstrous affront to humanity, the Berlin Wall. For the next 28 years, the wall stood as a stark and defiant reminder of communism's place in the Cold War, but its destruction provided the defining legacy for a presidency. Hello, I'm Tony Snow. Welcome to Tear Down This Wall. If Reagan had listened to key aides, he never would have given the speech. Many feared that the call to tear down the wall would provoke and inflame communist governments. They said it might appear unpresidential. But he was the president. He made the call. And as you'll learn, this speech was pure Ronald Reagan. In this program, key officials and members of Reagan's staff will give you a rare look at the fighting and infighting that took place during the writing of this speech. You'll hear from Sergei Khrushchev, the son of America's Cold War nemesis, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. He'll tell you why his father built the wall and reveal the details of several highly dangerous nuclear close calls during the Cold War. And you'll get reaction to the speech after 15 years by Mr. Gorbachev himself. Most of the Berlin Wall is gone now. This is one of the few sections that remain standing here in Berlin. Over the years, protesters and tourists have chipped away large pieces and small. Other blocks have found their way to museums. One large section resides at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California. We begin our story there.
This was what was known as the Berlin Wall.
The lesson that these school kids are learning is about a city and a world that was divided into East and West, into communism and democracy. It's a lesson that was known only too well a few decades ago. Along with the fads and teen idols of the post-World War II boom, young Americans were confronted by a scenario that was a living nightmare.
The 60s he told we need 500 ICBM with nuclear warhead that could destroy all the American infrastructure, and we don't need conventional forces at all.
Well, people forget, I think, sometimes the 50s and 60s were a pretty scary time. It was Khrushchev carrying on and threatening the West with its destruction.
I remember the air raid drills, thinking the Soviets are coming, and hiding underneath your desk in elementary school. The bomb shelter craze.
Beginning in the 1950s, as both the Soviets and Americans built up their arsenals of atomic bombs, the threat of nuclear annihilation was constant, and it was anything but a Cold War.
The order was to the captain, if they will attack us, you will use your torpedoes, 21 torpedo, 1 nuclear tipped. And he had to decide, use nuclear torpedo or not.
When the Soviets tried to install nuclear missiles on Cuba, America responded with a naval blockade. Sergei Khrushchev knows how close his father and President Kennedy came to destroying the world.
And in last moment, my father decided, let's make it different. We will turn back the ships that will really irritate Americans.
Although the threat of a nuclear war continued, the superpowers settled into a peaceful coexistence, and no one ever imagined that the situation would change in the near future.
I didn't think the Soviet Union would collapse. And I don't think anybody thought the Soviet Union would collapse until the 90s.
Détente was the term used by Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger for their approach to keeping the world safe.
Détente was a combination of containment plus using opportunities, if they arose, to ease tensions.
Well, I think détente was pretty widely welcomed here, as it was over most of Europe. Indeed, I recall Margaret Thatcher stating quite explicitly that she never expected to see the end of communism in her lifetime, only about 18 months before the Berlin Wall came down and the whole system started to change. The great fear in Europe had always been of Soviet land armies advancing across the North German plain, occupying Western Europe, imposing a communist system on the whole of the continent, while the United States stood paralyzed by.
Ronald Reagan was absolutely aware of the extraordinary danger that civilization faced, not just Russia and the United States, but in a nuclear age when our respective foreign policies depended on mutual assured destruction. It was horrifying to Reagan.
So far, détente's been a one-way street that the Soviet Union has used to pursue its own aims. The West won't contain communism. It'll transcend communism. To ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire.
I think that we were scared because we have the same fear like American, that America can start the war against us.
America will not conduct business as usual with the forces of oppression.
We're using these words that mean that really this politician can push this button.
And Reagan used to say to us, no, I won't, but it's healthy if they believe I may.
We must find peace through strength.
Peace through strength. It's the hallmark of Ronald Reagan.
What's so dramatic about Ronald Reagan is that he abandoned Kissinger, Nixon, détente and said, bull. What we want to do is win the Cold War. And what we want to do is see the wall come down.
By both word and deed, Ronald Reagan preserved world peace while doing the unthinkable, planning a strategy for the collapse of the Soviet Union and communism in Eastern Europe. Here, at his presidential library, Reagan's papers are in the archives. Among them are drafts of his speech at the Berlin Wall.
In the boxes behind me are National Security Council comments, markups by my boss, Tony Dolan, and even this is only a small fraction of all the material relating to this speech.
Peter Robinson was only 26 years old when he got the assignment to write that speech.
Everybody recognized that sheerly by virtue of the setting, the president in Berlin speaking in front of the Berlin Wall, that this was going to be an important speech. I just knew that I was a man in trouble.
Straight ahead, I'll take you to Berlin's Brandenburg Gate, ground zero for the Cold War, the place where the wall first took shape and emerged as a potent symbol of the difference between East and West, right and wrong, good and evil.
V6 Nissan Altima, North American Car of the Year.
Introducing the new Trim and Vac from Wall, the first vacuuming beard and mustache trimmer, with an 11-position adjustable guide and a rotating detail blade. So you'll get the neat beard you want, without all the mess you hate.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Are you making a mess in there?
It's the new Trim and Vac. Neat beard, clean sink. From Wall, the leading American maker of clippers and trimmers.
Attention ladies in aisle 4, getting the nutrition you'd like out of that cereal?
Yeah?
Because you need 4 boxes of that to get the folic acid in just 1 box of total.
Big appetite.
Excuse me, 11 boxes to get the amount of zinc in total.
Need another coupon?
And you, even 25 boxes couldn't equal the amount of vitamin E in total.
Express Lane? I don't think so.
Only Total has 100% of 12 vitamins and minerals. No other leading cereal comes close.
We'll take the Total.
Total Raisin Bran, Total Cornflakes. What are you getting for breakfast?
Let's return to our story as we take a walk through ground zero of the Cold War.
The ruins of Berlin, an ocean of shattered debris, dramatize the plight.
By the end of World War II, Berlin was rubble, a huge expanse of rubble. The city was slowly rebuilt, very slowly. In fact, the reconstruction continues even today, as Tony Snow and Reagan speechwriter Peter Robinson saw during their walking tour. One of the few monuments that survived the war is the Brandenburg Gate.
All right, so here we are approaching the Brandenburg Gate, which, like most of Berlin, is under construction.
Built in 1791, not originally a monument to war, simply a gate to the city. Further down this street is the Victory Column, which commemorates war against Denmark, war against the Austrians, war against France. A couple of 100 yards on the other side, Hitler's bunker. In other words, right here is one of the central places on Earth in the history of warfare in the Western world.
The drive into the heart of Nazi Germany in the final hours of the European war.
The victors of World War II split Germany in two. And although it was a long way into the east, the historic German capital of Berlin was also split in two. Within 3 years of the war's end, Berlin was the site of a series of crises. The 1948 Soviet blockade, answered by a massive Western airlift of food and supplies that lasted almost a year. A 1953 uprising in East Germany, resulting in a large-scale emigration to the West. 3 million East Germans, nearly a fifth of the population. The East Germans and the Soviets had to do something.
East German soldiers, at the direction of the Kremlin, beginning the construction of a barbed wire fence to shut off the escape routes to West Berlin.
So here we are again at ground zero in the Cold War, not only the Brandenburg Gate, but the wall. They're in the middle of the street, as you pointed out. The bricks representing where the wall once stood. So you go back, it's August 13th, 61. It's middle of the night, and that's when the barbed wire came out. Built in such a way as to cut off all traffic and commerce, and it did. Well, if we look over there, you can see an area that used to be called no man's land, because over there, we've referred to it already, is where the killing fields were, where a lot of people tried to make their way to the wall and didn't.
found many stories of escapes, and I witnessed many.
NBC foreign correspondent Irving R. Levine reported from Berlin as the wall went up.
I remember an elderly German woman, and as she was there waiting for help to be rescued, East German police broke into the apartment and grabbed her shoulders. By that time, West Germans are tugging at her feet. In microcosm, it was the Cold War.
But at last, one more small victory for liberty. One more human soul snatched from communist degradation.
Further up here, actually, we drove past yesterday's checkpoint Charlie. It was the demarcation line between the American and Soviet zones.
This famous standoff took place near there, as I recall. Soviet tanks, East German tanks, and American tanks simply staring down each other's gun barrels.
There was a great fear in the United States, in Germany in particular, that we were headed toward a war. John F. Kennedy had made a bad impression on Khrushchev at the time as being a weak leader.
Khrushchev and Kennedy met in Vienna in early '61. And at that point, Khrushchev looked at John Kennedy and said, if you ever do anything to Berlin, we'll crush you. He threatened Kennedy, will crush you because Berlin is ours. And it very much intimidating the young American president.
The continuing breaks for freedom that murderous machine guns fail to discourage forces the East German communist regime to strengthen its shameful Berlin barricade.
Over the years, communists rebuilt the wall 4 times until it became a concrete barrier totally encircling West Berlin. West Berliners treated it with scorn and worse. They decorated it with inspired graffiti. The eastern side, however, remained blank. And the green lawns leading up to the eastern side of the wall turned into a killing field where almost 200 people died trying to escape.
And of course, my problem, you were a speechwriter, my problem was the President of the United States is going to stand here, and I've got to give him something to say.
President Kennedy's visit to West Berlin evoked the most emotional welcome the divided city ever witnessed.
Very much in my mind was John Kennedy's speech at the City Hall, again, just walking distance away from here.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin.
I didn't want to go head-to-head with John Kennedy. Of course, I wanted to avoid that comparison at a different time.
I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
I was in terrible trouble, Tony.
Well, on the other hand, let's face it, you have the wall and you have the Brandenburg Gate. You've got...
And Ronald Reagan.
And Ronald Reagan.
Pontiac has a new vibe, starting at $16,900. Pontiac's in overdrive. See your dealer today.
Walgreens has thousands of locations across America, from the corner of Elm in Maine to the corner of Montgomery and Pine, to our newest location, Walgreens.com. You can manage your health care on America's healthiest website, because America's favorite corner drugstore is now located on the corner of your desk. Register online or come into Walgreens Pharmacy and we'll do it for you. Walgreens.com. Another reason Walgreens is the pharmacy America trusts.
Support public transportation. For some people, it's the only way to go.
A message from this station and the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services.
News Now 53. When you're working late, it's never too late for local news from the News on 6.
News Now 53 replays the latest newscasts from the News on 6, so you can get your weather on your schedule.
Or if you didn't catch the scores, catch News Now 53 anytime.
Anytime you want. It's the News on 6, 24 hours a day on News Now 53.
Sponsored locally in part by Classic Chevy.
Welcome back to Tear Down This Wall. Ronald Reagan didn't spend a lot of time in Berlin when he gave his famous speech. His visit lasted less than a day. But he did stop here at Bellevue Castle for a photo opportunity with West German officials. Now, at the time, few people thought it possible that the speech might hasten the collapse of communism, then a powerful ideology responsible for the slaughter of tens of millions and the subjugation of hundreds of millions. But Reagan thought it was possible. As a matter of fact, he had a plan. And that plan had its genesis in Hollywood.
Ronald Reagan acted.
Win just one for the Kipper.
Ronald Reagan sold.
Behind this picture, inside here, is a projection machine for home movies. Of course, it comes in kind of handy when I want to run one of my old pictures, too.
But most of all, Ronald Reagan believed.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
And in time, with public acceptance of his beliefs, he became the leader of the free world.
These are the boys of Puente Hope. But 40 years ago at this moment, the air was dense with smoke.
2 years after the death of FDR and the end of the Second World War, Reagan was elected president of the Screen Actors Guild. It was the first step on his path to leadership.
He was a Franklin Roosevelt Democrat in his early years, so he's not somebody coming out of a McCarthyite tradition, yet he was a patriot. He, in 1947, testified about the kind of activities that were going on that seemed very unpatriotic to him.
If it is proven that this organization is the agent of a foreign power?
Unpatriotic, Reagan thought, because those activities were communistic. He first saw communism in action, he believed, in the late 40s, when some of the left-leaning Hollywood unions went on strike. He opposed them. They opposed him.
This is the result of a bomb dropped on my front porch, in which my family narrowly escaped injury.
There was even threats to Reagan's life, threats that he would get beaten, threats that he wouldn't get jobs.
We're meeting it again now under the name of communism, and it is national expansion on the part of Russia.
Reagan paid a price for views like these.
Some people claim he was ostracized and had to end up working a kind of lower circuit because some of the big Hollywood companies wanted nothing to do with Ronnie, you know, the red hater.
Watch it, Bonzo, steady. Hey, Bonzo!
He despised the suppression of the human spirit, freedom, creativeness, that was part and parcel of a communist system. So that would account largely for his negative reaction.
But there were those who opposed the communist system even more than Reagan. Some of them were members of the House of Representatives, and they were not always fair.
The Committee on Un-American Activities asks, is he a communist?
As a result of the committee's hearings, many people's reputations, even their lives, were ruined by accusations that they belonged to or sympathized with the Communist Party.
I am not and was not
a member of the Communist Party.
During the height of the Cold War, the United States had several hot encounters with the Russians and their global partners.
The issue which confronts the Security Council is grave.
One of those encounters involved the building of the Berlin Wall. It happened during John F. Kennedy's presidency.
Reagan disdained Kennedy's for that and for not having taken care of what he considered to be an obligation, not to allow that wall to have been built in the first place.
1 year after the wall went up in Berlin, lifelong Democrat Ronald Reagan changed his party registration. He was now a Republican.
Ronald Reagan hit the national political spotlight in 1964 when he delivered this incredible speech at the Republican convention.
Mr. Reagan.
Thank you.
Reagan went around for General Electric all over the country talking to workers.
I have spent most of my life as a Democrat I recently have seen fit to follow another course.
His genius was realizing that working class people, maybe people at Harvard think blue collar workers were liberal, left-wing, socialist. Most of them were driving pickup trucks, drinking Budweiser, listening to Merle Haggard, and were American patriots. That group became known as Reagan Democrats.
Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether
and he kept trying the speech out. And so by the time he got to the convention, he had a professional act.
Thank you very much.
Which he unleashed on the crowd at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, and they went wild.
We used to call that the speech because we refer back to it. This is in the 80s during his presidency. It was all right there, 16 years before he was elected president.
And at that moment, everybody said, Reagan's the man to watch.
Shortly after that, a group of California businessmen got together to support Reagan's candidacy for governor in 1966. He won. It was a huge upset. It was during his 2 terms as governor of California that Reagan set his sights on a bigger job.
I'd been director of the budget, as well as Secretary of the Treasury and Secretary of Labor. He was governor. And he gave me a grilling about the budget. And I remember reflecting afterwards, this man doesn't just want to run for president, he wants to do something when he's president.
He thought about seeking the job in 1968. He did seek it in 1976, making a serious run for the White House, but losing the Republican nomination to Gerald Ford. He made a strong showing, though, and the groundwork was laid for 1980.
I believe the Republican Party has a platform that is a banner of bold, unmistakable colors with no pale pastel shades.
As Reagan prepared to run for the presidency again, he went on a world tour in 1978.
He went to the Far East, and he went to London, and went to France, but he went to Germany, and he went to Berlin. And he saw the Berlin Wall, and he was shocked by it.
That structure he thought never should have existed, and which, in the years of its existence, had become the great brooding symbol of the Cold War.
He looked at it with a sort of a fierce look on his face, hating it, and turned and said, we've got to find a way to knock this thing down. 9 years later, as President of the United States, he would stand before the wall at the Brandenburg Gate and say essentially the same thing. It was his deeply held view.
And because it was, Reagan was moved by the stories he heard of people who sought their freedom in spite of the wall.
We went to see the very spot where Peter Fechter, who tried to come over the wall and was shot and left impaled upon the barbed wire to die and to bleed to death. And this was a story that really motivated the governor, I think, really animated him in a serious way.
The story of Ronald Reagan's speech at the Berlin Wall continues after the latest headlines from the Fox News desk.
Nissan 4x4. It's the next frontier.
How do you invest to help secure your children's future? You start with your dreams and Edward Jones.
My life, my world, it all begins with a dream.
Edward Jones.
Fox News Channel. We're right on target. We're sharp. We're there.
Viewers, tune to us for the truth.
and that's what they get.
An interesting, compelling, fast-moving glimpse at the world around us.
Information that's true and accurate, and information that's fair and balanced as well.
How will the story affect you, your life? That's what's real.
A perspective on the day's events that maybe you haven't thought of before.
Fair and balanced is not a slogan. It is what we do every day.
Fox News Live, I'm Derry Alexander. Afghan leaders getting down to the business of rebuilding their country, laying the foundation for a new government. Fox's Jonathan Seri has more from Kabul.
More than 1,000 delegates have already arrived here in Kabul for the upcoming Loya Jirga, or Grand National Council, that will draft Afghanistan's new government. The conference will include more than 1,500 delegates once it gets underway, delegates selected from tribes and villages across the entire country. Critics question the integrity of some delegates, saying in many parts of Afghanistan, warlords use their power and money to influence the selection process. Do these warlords and others living off bloodshed have any business acting as politicians? Defenders of the Loya Jirga admit the process is not perfect, but say after 2 decades of war in Afghanistan, there's little room for people here to take a holier-than-thou attitude.
This country has just come out of 23 years of conflict, and it's extremely difficult to demonstrate, to give evidence of who is guilty and who is not guilty of what.
The Loya Jirga runs Monday through Saturday. In Kabul, Jonathan Seri, Fox News.
And in horse racing, no Triple Crown winner this year at the Belmont Stakes. War Emblem won the first 2 legs of the crown, but stumbled badly coming out of the gate and finished 8th. The winner was Sarava. He becomes the biggest long shot ever to win the Belmont. He went off at 70-1 odds and was piloted to victory by jockey Edgar Prado. Medaglia d'Oro finished 2nd, and Sunday Break was 3rd. I will have another update at the top of the hour. I am Derry Alexander. Now, the Fox News special, Tear Down This Wall, continues. You're watching the most powerful name in news, Fox News Channel. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Tear Down This Wall. I'm Tony Snow. The task of writing Reagan's Berlin Wall address fell to Peter Robinson, a White House speechwriter. But the State Department, National Security Council, and ranking diplomats in Germany had their own ideas about what the president should and should not say. The inspiration for Reagan's famous line, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," came from an unusual gathering here in Berlin.
I noticed words crudely spray-painted upon the wall, perhaps by a young Berliner. Quote, "This wall will fall, beliefs become reality."
The president in Berlin, speaking in front of the Berlin Wall, this was going to be an important speech. The president will stand in front of the Brandenburg Gate. He'll speak for about 30 or 40 minutes. He'll have an audience of about 10,000. And given the setting, he probably ought to talk about foreign policy. That was my guidance. A number of weeks before the president was to give the speech, I came here to Berlin on the presidential pre-advance. I broke away from the American Party to go have dinner with some West Berliners. And I mentioned that I had been warned by the American diplomats that the president probably ought not to talk directly about the Berlin Wall. And there was silence. And they went around the room, and every person in the room told a story about how much he hated the wall every day.
Frustrating stories of life behind the wall are retold 15 years later at a reunion party with those same Berliners who innocently helped a president promote change.
We couldn't believe that dividing up the world by fence and in Berlin by wall could be accepted.
I couldn't imagine to visit West Berlin without frontier control and border control.
At that time, we simply did not want to go there. We hated the policemen.
They had the automatic mines, the shooting arrangements, which when people touched the wall, were shooting bullets left and right.
We
wanted to leave West Berlin quite frequently, and every time you had to stop there, take your glasses off, look in my eyes. I just wanted this wall to go.
Note number 17 from Ingeborg Elz. If the Russians are willing to open up, then the wall must go. Open the Brandenburg Gate.
We didn't think of President Reagan or Mr. Gorbachev. We thought of that ridiculous wall.
What Berliners felt about the wall, and also, frankly, that was just such a wonderful idea that I grabbed it and went back to Washington and built the speech around it.
Peter did a very good job capturing the sentiments and the thoughts that Reagan wanted to portray. But remember, the best speechwriter in the White House was Ronald Reagan.
Ich hab noch keinen Koffer in Berlin.
I found that the first version was not Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, but Herr Gorbachev, take down this wall. Terrible, a clunker of a line. Well, that was quite typical of Tony. He'd take your first draft, say interesting, and then throw it out and push you to do better.
And he actually got angry at me. And when he went out and the door slammed, I sort of smiled and said, gee, now we're going to get a good draft. And sure enough, 2 days later, in it came, and it was terrific.
My draft went to the president, and the president said, well, that passage about the wall, that's what I'd like to say to the people on the other side of the wall. That wall has to come down. The speech then went out to staffing, and a 3-week war broke out. Colin Powell was there waiting for me. He was director at that time of the National Security Council. So Colin Powell and I butted heads. Just an amazing thought that I had the audacity to do it, but I was fighting for a speech for Ronald Reagan.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe.
The State Department objected for the reason that they thought it would cause too much problems for Gorbachev, who was trying to work through perestroika and glasnost.
The State Department heard that President Reagan got along pretty well with Gorbachev, and they said, well, the president wouldn't want to personalize it in this way.
If you seek liberalization, come here to this gate.
I buzzed Tom Griscom, who was communications director, and I said, Tommy, this line here about Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, that ought to come out. He said, why? And I said, because it is so unlikely that it's unpresidential. And Tommy, who's a good newspaper man, said, but that's where I'll get my 30-second soundbite.
It's from a member of the National Security Council to Colin Powell, June 2nd, 1987. That's just 10 days before the speech was to be given. One sentence. The Brandenburg Gate speech is better than before, but it's a mediocre speech and a missed opportunity.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
There were 6, 7 drafts. Even to the morning in Venice, we had a staff meeting, and there were still cables coming in trying to get critical sections out.
This speech was going to sort of speed some things up, but there are also instincts. And in this case, I think the instinct that President Reagan had was right.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
It turns out the speechwriter checked with the president, and he was very happy to say it in those words.
Why, in that meeting with West Berliners, did I write down that comment by Ingeborg Elz? Because something told me, I had a hunch. That speech belongs to Ronald Reagan, and I was darned lucky to have had the chance to be associated with it.
With 150 available accessories and the fastest top speed around, the Dremel rotary tool, or cordless rotary tool, is always the right tool for the job. You'll do just about anything to use them. The Dremel rotary tool, available with or without a cord.
It's not about answering the questions, but about questioning the answers. the all-new Aereo SX from Suzuki. It has more standard horsepower than Honda Civic, Ford Focus, or Toyota Matrix, plus all the room you're looking for. It's my car. You knew this was coming. You just didn't know from where. Introducing the new Suzuki Aereo SX. Drive on. Lease a Suzuki Aereo SX today for $219 per month with only $19.19 to start.
Unsociable host or unbearable allergies? When seasonal allergies keep you from enjoying the things you do, Allegra can help. Only Allegra has fexofenadine, so unlike many other antihistamines, it won't make you drowsy. And Allegra gives you 24-hour relief. For people 12 and older, side effects are low and may include headache, cold, or back pain. Talk to your doctor today about Allegra and get back to your party. Non-drowsy Allegra. Real relief for real living.
It was a gray day in Berlin on June 12, 1987. A crowd of 10,000 had gathered at the wall to hear the American president. Many more would have come, but West Berlin police sealed off part of the city to block a large group of anti-Reagan, anti-missile protesters. Well, by the end of the day, Reagan had silenced his critics and changed history.
We come to Berlin, we American presidents, because it's our duty to speak in this place of freedom. But I must confess, we're drawn here by other things as well. The advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable.
You know, it wasn't the only show he put on. There were many in those days. At the time, we weren't so savvy at public relations.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Totally staged.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
It was orchestrated, planned out. Such an act was designed to press on a raw nerve.
Mr. Gorbachev had started to make those very important changes and reforms within the Soviet Union. I think President Reagan was still very skeptical as to whether it was possible to reform the Soviet Union.
We had already begun to change relations and take a look at reduction of nuclear weapons.
Gorbachev said that it's time to disarm. But it was important for us to count this Soviet threat and react with the intermediary missiles. For Germany, this was a bad thing at a bad time.
There was a big opposition inside our society, people marching for peace against the missiles. Our country was divided. If there would be a next war in Europe, it would be on the territory of Germany, that was for sure.
And to those who demonstrate so, I wonder if they have ever asked themselves that if they should have the kind of government they apparently seek, no one would ever be able to do what they're doing again.
Now, Mr. Reagan he mentions the wall to be taken down, but hardly anybody in the general public in the East took it very serious.
It was a slogan. It wasn't actually seen as though Mr. Gorbachev was going to come by now and rip down the wall. Well, it was just something that somebody said.
I had my doubts, but I thought it was a fantastic moment, never realizing, though, that one day it would come true.
People just shouted and jumped, and there was the feeling that there was a vision. There was really a rapture in the public.
It was most exciting. We had thousands of people there. It was a gray day at the beginning, and there was a lot of security. And when the president finally arrived, you should have heard the roar from the audience. It was fantastic.
Our gathering today is being broadcast throughout Western Europe and North America. I understand that it is being seen and heard as well in the East. To those listening in East Berlin, a special word.
It really was spine-tingling to stand there at the Brandenburg Gate in the shadow of the wall and to hear him utter this challenge. And it was a challenge.
This wasn't some sort of political cliche or PR trick. It expressed deep emotion.
he was one of the few visiting statesmen and politicians who sensed physically what it meant to divide a nation.
I remember President Reagan telling Margaret Thatcher afterwards that he was really angry when he made that speech. He was angry at what he could see of East Berlin. And it all sort of boiled up on him.
What a strange idea. It wouldn't work. I couldn't imagine how it worked to live without the wall.
In President von Weizsäcker's staff meeting the following morning, he was angry about it. But what a ham-fisted speech. How could that American come over here and sound like an anti-communist cowboy?
They had no influence on us. It just confirmed to us that here is a person who uses his acting skills in politics. Nothing more than that.
I think it's fair to say that within the high councils of the world of media and academia at the time, it was not thought so great. I mean, it was a thunderclap, clearly, when it was heard. And it was a shock. There was a fair amount of the usual tut-tutting that accompanied everything Ronald Reagan ever did that had a feeling of spontaneity.
I think Reagan was a great president. I can't say he was the best. He was a great president with whom we started the process of closer relations, cooperation, and partnership.
I had tears in my eyes watching all of the East Berliners climbing over the wall, bulldozing the wall, hammers and chisels and sledgehammers. And I remember having chills up and down my spine, saying Ronald Reagan was right.
I wrote the speech, and I fought for it. I don't think of it as my speech. It belongs to Ronald Reagan.
Your World Summer Sale going on now. Big pool, round pools, oval pools. All sizes, shapes, and colors are on sale now. 24-foot pool package, $11.99. 27-foot pool package, $18.99. Sundance, jacuzzi, and Vita Spas as low as $36.99. 24-foot pool package, $11.99. 27-foot pool package, $18.99. Sundance, jacuzzi, and Vita Spa as low as $36.99. Leisure World Summer Sale, 61st in Garnett.
Oh, look at this guy. Ah, what a mess. Of course, this driver can't help it. He's a pig. What's your excuse? Our town is a beautiful place to live. Pitch in and keep it that way. And when you see someone littering, call the litter hog line and squeal on a pig.
There is nothing on this earth more precious than a child, and there is nothing more fragile and vulnerable. Yet thousands of children suffer from abuse. Beyond the tragic headlines of physical abuse are even more innocent victims of emotional neglect. With every word we say, with every action, we can hurt or heal. So take every opportunity to praise a child. To get help with parenting, call the Healthy Families Program at the Parent Child Center, 599-7999.
Get fit with the Awesome Hour Upper Body Home Workout, the new video from the creators of the best-selling Fitness Made Simple program. Work out with fitness celebrity John Bastow at home and learn the keys to sculpting a lean, muscular physique.
The Awesome Hour Upper Body Home Workout provides exercises to help build your chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and even abs.
Just 1 hour or less for each workout. Now there's no time excuse for not staying in shape. Have your credit card ready and call now to order.
Welcome back to Tear Down This Wall. The Berlin Wall speech became a defining moment for the Reagan presidency. But what if he had given the speech and nothing had happened? That possibility never occurred to Reagan. The speech fit into a plan that was central to his presidency, a plan to topple the Soviet Union and its Eastern European empire.
It is essential that we negotiate from a position of strength. There must be a real incentive for the Soviets to take these talks seriously.
Reagan was exactly the right president for the 80s.
People forget that in the early 1980s, there was a very distinct fear of an attack on the Russians or the Russians attacking us.
His theory of the Cold War was that we win and they lose.
This requires that we rebuild our defenses.
He's been in office since January. He's been shot in the chest in March, and here he is 60 days later, and he's talking about rolling back communism.
The West won't contain communism. It'll transcend communism.
Reagan did not want to say warm and cozy things about them over toasting glasses of vodka. He wanted to say, I think it's an evil institution.
To ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire.
The phrase evil empire was primarily useful as a signal to the American public.
The United States was evil empire for us. We were evil empire for the United States.
But Reagan was determined to put the empire he thought was evil out of business.
Ronald Reagan understood how to bring down the Soviet Union was not through a conventional or a nuclear war. It was by spending them into the poorhouse.
And the U.S. had other techniques.
We willingly let the Soviets buy or steal defective technology so that they would invest money into a dry hole.
I mean, we were even making it difficult to allow the Japanese to sell technology to the Soviets.
The United States practiced economic warfare.
Well, it was not so much an economic campaign as it was to make sure that the Soviets then realized that they could never win a war against the United States or against the West.
The strategy was multifaceted, and there's a document of that strategy.
This is a copy of a document once classified secret and sensitive. It is known as National Security Decision Directive Number 75. It is a plan to disrupt the Soviet economy and neutralize Soviet control over Eastern Europe and other points on the globe. What with Reagan's suffocating policies and Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms of his homeland, the Soviet Union was starting to implode economically.
These guys were spent. There was nothing left.
When the Soviet Empire begins to crumble, it's for three reasons. One, it's spiritual. Number two, it is economic. And number three, it's military.
The Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars, was unveiled in 1983.
The proof looks like the SDI did help break the back. I mean, many people laughed at Reagan because of the Star Wars analogy, and that now we're going to have a satellite in space that can shoot down any incoming ICBMs into the United States.
Yet for the American president, one terrible symbol of hypocrisy and Soviet duplicity still remained.
We've never needed walls or minefields or barbed wire to keep our people in.
So the Berlin Wall became a flashpoint in the Cold War from '61 onwards, where people wondering, why doesn't it come down? When will it come down?
Reagan eventually made his speech in Berlin.
President von Weizsäcker.
And the rest is history. Or is it?
Had he not done so, it's entirely possible that the East Germans would never have rallied against their government.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace.
15 years after the speech, Gorbachev feels the former president has received too much credit for the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union.
No, he had no influence on us. It just confirmed to us that here is a person who uses his acting skills in politics. Nothing more than that.
He would just get in line with hundreds, maybe thousands of others who underestimated Reagan and considered him to be just an actor.
It's true that Reagan delivered his speeches like an actor.
I certainly did.
But when he became president in 1981, he determined that there would be no happy Hollywood ending for the Soviet Union.
The march of freedom and democracy, which will leave Marxism, Leninism on the ash heap of history, as it has left other tyrannies which stifle the freedom and muzzle the self-expression of the people.
In addition to Star Wars, Reagan had another secret weapon, an ally at the Vatican, a man whose roots were in Poland.
The willingness of people like Pope John Paul to stand up for solidarity in the movement in Poland.
We would flood Eastern Europe, particularly Poland, with information and photocopy machines and all sorts of things that would support solidarity.
Once Poland was gone, there was no way that the Soviets could ever get to the rest of Western Europe.
I had seen the wall, and I was always struck by the fact that our defenses pointed east to try to counter a prospective invasion. The Soviet guns also pointed east to keep people in.
When the Berlin Wall finally came down in November of 1989, it was for Reagan a dream come true.
Hundreds of thousands of people poured out through Hungary and Austria. That was going to continue, and there was really no way of stopping it.
But it would take another 2 years for the old Soviet Union to collapse.
I have seen the human race through a period of unparalleled tumult and triumph. I have seen the birth of communism and the death of communism.
To Nissan, it's a fusion of performance, styling, and innovation. To 50 renowned automotive journalists, however, it's an aphrodisiac. Presenting the V6 Nissan Altima, North American Car of the Year.
Attention ladies in aisle 4, getting the nutrition you'd like out of that cereal?
Yeah?
Because you need 4 boxes of that to get the folic acid in just 1 box of total.
Big appetite.
Excuse me, 11 boxes to get the amount of zinc in total.
Need another coupon?
And you, even 25 boxes couldn't equal the amount of vitamin E in total.
Express Lane? I don't think so.
Only Total has 100% of 12 vitamins and minerals. No other leading cereal comes close.
We'll take the Total.
Total Raisin Bran, Total Cornflakes. What are you getting for breakfast?
Michael Skakel, guilty. As this 27-year-old murder mystery comes to an end, stay with Fox News Channel for continuing coverage of the Kennedy cousin trial.
Tightening our border, Customs Service, the Transportation Security Administration of Homeland Security, the threat assessment, cabinet level information must be fully shared. Federal Intelligence Service, biological, nuclear weapons, the most extensive reorganization of the federal government.
Complete, comprehensive coverage on reactions to the president's plan, only on the network America trusts, Fox News Channel.
Welcome back to Tear Down This Wall. We asked each of our guests, could anybody but Ronald Reagan have made the Berlin Wall speech? Here's what they had to say.
It all had the unmistakable look of a concentration camp, yet people kept filtering through.
So many people had died trying to get out and away from communism.
One man said, my sister lives so and so many kilometers in that direction, and I haven't seen her in more than 20 years.
I remember another case when a woman with a 9-month-old baby managed to crawl under the barbed wire with East Germans firing at her.
It was barbaric. It was unnatural.
He did see that communism was evil, that it was intrinsically inhumane. It sapped people's spirit. It ruined their productivity. It ruined their initiative.
It was a speech of true convictions. There is nobody who could have delivered it but Ronald Reagan.
We didn't think a world could exist half slave and half free. And if you will, Reagan was our Lincoln.
We must be staunch in our conviction that freedom is not the sole prerogative of a lucky few, but the inalienable and universal right of all human beings.
He believed what he said. People understood he believed what he said. The Russians understood what he said and believed him.
He knew darn well what needed to be said and what needed to be done.
So he just called a spade a spade.
They are the focus of evil in the modern world.
Phrases like the evil empire, like tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev, like the axis of evil, they're what people carry in their mind for years afterwards. They, as it were, define the history, they define the policy. And thank God we have politicians who are brave enough to use those phrases.
Please be seated.
Reagan was a very special person. He was perhaps the most presidential person I ever knew. He knew exactly who he was. He had no trouble with that. He knew he was president of the United States, and he liked it.
We've stressed our willingness to meet the Soviets halfway in talks on strategic weapons. But as Commander-in-Chief, I have an obligation to protect this country, and I will never allow political expediency to influence these crucial negotiations.
This president at that time was the right one to put that challenge out there.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
You know, a lot of other presidents had a chance to give that speech, and no other president ever did it.
I can't honestly say that I ever anticipated that the Soviet Union would collapse.
I don't think anybody thought the Soviet Union would collapse until the 90s. There was no inside information to suggest that it would collapse.
The sense that this standoff would hold seemed increasingly likely. So as equally as the standoff seemed likely, the Soviet Union seemed permanent.
I was just taking notes for him and drawing on his principles, drawing even on his voice. That speech belongs to Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
That speech was pure Ronald Reagan. He was strong, he was determined, he was also the biggest guy in the battle. And the Russians knew that.
Thanks for joining us for this Fox News Channel special. From Berlin, I'm Tony Snow for Fox News.